Today we're answering your questions on advanced Photoshop. Hey guys, and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find us on Twitter at Phlearn. Joining us in the studio today is our wonderful Kat Filipinas. What's up, Kat?
Hi, Aaron.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. It's really nice to have your arm in mine. It's
interlocking.
Interlocking, yeah. It helps to answer Photoshop questions, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. This is a 10-question segment, and we submitted a prompt earlier this week, which was advanced Photoshop, and we had you guys submit your questions on advanced Photoshop. And today, we chose the top 10 questions, and we're going to be answering them right now.
All right, this first one is from Ali Isan from YouTube. They're asking, hey Aaron, I'd like to know more about tone mapping, when to use it, and how. P.S. Your videos at Phlearn probably are the most informative tutorials on YouTube. Greetings from Iraq. Thanks.
Oh, man, thanks so much. Okay, tone mapping, this is a really good question. And in my opinion, tone mapping can refer to a lot of things. So I'm gonna answer like what it means to me, and then we can go from there. But tone mapping basically, for me, is like a color mapping. So like choosing whether you're gonna color something based on the color of the highlights and the shadows and how to actually apply that onto the image. Is that pretty much what it means to you too?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Cool. Some of these terms can be a little bit vague, so we're going to answer them to the best of our ability. But we've got a sample image here. This is actually from our photo shoot we did 2 days ago, so really, really cool. And I'm going to show you a little bit how to tone map it, and we're going to just jump right in. So this is one of our images, and it was such a fun shoot, our fashion shoot. And this is actually going to be next week, is Fashion Week here on Phlearn, so be sure to be tuned in for that. Here's a great idea for tone mapping. Oftentimes what I like to do, we're going to grab a new adjustment layer, and I'm going to go down here to where it says a gradient map. And I don't use this a whole lot, but when I do, I make sure to apply it to a different... I was trying to do like a most interesting man in the world, but that totally failed. All right, so we're gonna use this gradient map, and basically what this is gonna do is it's going to map one color to the shadows and another color to the highlights. So you can see by default we've got like a pink color here is defining the color of our shadows, and then the white is defining the color of our highlights. It's just one layer here. Some cool things you can do, you can change your layer blend mode from normal down here to something like color, or you can change it to something like hue, and these are gonna get some different, basically some different effects going on in your image. Let's just change this back to normal. And now what we're going to do is we're going to click here on our gradient editor, and we're going to choose some different colors here, colors that may just work a little bit better for our final image. So we're going to choose this color. Instead of being a pink, let's just click there, and I'm going to choose like a nice deep dark blue, and we're going to hit OK there. So you can see our shadows are coming to this nice deep blue. And then our highlights, we're going to click here. Instead of being white, I'm going to go over to like a nice light yellow, something like that. All right, so you can see it's going from blue to yellow now. And let's say in here somewhere, I'd like to add a red. So there, I'm gonna click over here, and we're gonna add a nice red, but you can see it looks a little bit weird because we need to make sure that this red is somewhere in between like this dark place and this white place. So we need to make it a little bit darker. Let's just bring this color here. We need to make it a little bit darker, and then it's gonna start to look a little bit better. There we go. And if you can go too dark or too light, it's just gonna kind of change depending on where you're clicking here. So you can get something like this. All right, there we go, that looks pretty good. We're gonna hit OK, and now you can even move this slider around. Like if you wanna move it more to the left or more to the right, you're gonna get some different effects here. So this is what I would consider tone mapping. Now, we're gonna hit OK, and then I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. So this is a totally tone mapped image. It's none of the original color remains, we've just got this left. Now the cool thing you can do is if you want to, you can still change your blending mode to something like hue or color, which are gonna give you different effects, or we can go back to normal, and I'm just gonna lower the opacity to about 50%, and then we have a tone mapped image. So something that looks totally different, but it does have the blues and the reds and the yellows from the original image applied. So that's when I would use tone mapping, is when I would wanna create like a certain type of look, like a more artistic type of photo, and this is a really great way to do it.
Cool.
It's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
It's fun.
I like that.
It is. Cool. Good question.
This next one is from Aaron Delanoy on YouTube. He's asking, hello Aaron, I notice sometimes you use apply image to a layer mask and other times you use blend if. Could you explain when one is better than the other? Thanks.
All right, this is a really good question, Aaron. So apply image is basically something that is gonna be a little bit more subtle than the blend if technique. They're both a great technique, and I'll just kind of show you guys how I use one versus the other, but the end result is usually pretty similar. If I want something a little bit more of like a subtle refinement, I think apply image is better, but they're so subtle that oftentimes it doesn't really make a huge difference whatever you use. Let's go ahead and see. I'm going to zoom in to our image here, and we're going to grab a curves adjustment layer. So let's go to a curves adjustment layer, and then I'm going to hit Command J. We're going to make it a little bit brighter. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to hit Command J. So we have two of the exact same curves adjustment layers, right? One of them we're going to use blend if, and the other one we're going to use apply image. So on this layer, what we're going to do is I'm going to double click here. And what I like to do is basically have this affect only my shadows. So I want to bring the brightness of my shadows up a little bit. Let's say your shadows are a little bit too dark, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and go from the right to the left, making this layer not visible where my highlights are. And we're gonna hit OK. So this is basically only gonna be visible where the shadows are. Now if you wanted to continue to use your layer mask, you could have this visible only on her face. We're gonna do that in just 1 second. Okay, so that's visible only where the shadows are. Now, we're gonna click on this layer, and instead of going to double clicking and going to the blend if, what we're gonna do is click on our layer mask, go to image, and then down here to apply image. Now what we're gonna do is click on this invert tab. There we go, and hit OK. So we can see one of them actually changes how the layer blends in. The other one just affects the layer mask. So I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and click on this layer mask. And basically what it's doing is it's saying don't be visible where the layer or the image is a little bit lighter. So it looks like an inverse right now because I want this layer to be only visible in the shadows. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of. You should have, if you want a layer to only be visible in the darks, it should look like an inverted layer mask. All right, so it looks a little bit weird, but basically this is what it looks like from apply image, and this is what it looks like using blend if. So in my opinion, apply image is usually a little bit more subtle, and blend if is just, it's a little bit more coarse. There's not usually a huge difference. The things that I like about the differences between these are, if I am using apply image, let's say I would click on this layer, I can do it again. So you can continue to hit apply image over and over again, and it'll make the effect even more subtle every time. So I'm gonna go to image and then down to apply image again. There we go, and it's gonna make it even more subtle, and we can go to image and then apply image again, and it'll make it even more subtle. So now we're kind of getting into the differences between the two. Where this is still relatively coarse. This is a lot more of a subtle adjustment there. Okay, so the subtlety is for apply image. But with a curves adjustment layer, you can then go in and play with your layer mask a little bit more because your layer mask has not been affected. Here's the kicker. You can use apply image and blend if on the same layer.
Oh.
This is gonna blow some minds here. So this layer here, we used blend if, basically making it not visible where the underlying layer is lighter. And I can just copy this layer mask from one layer to the other, or I can just go to image and then down to apply image and do the same thing. So the answer is they're relatively similar. If you're looking for something a little bit more subtle, go with apply image. And I would just recommend playing around with these two effects. Lately I've been using apply image more than blend if, but that's just, it kind of changes. Next month I might be back on blend if. So good question, and that's kind of the differences between the two.
Cool, so it's just like a preference, really?
Mostly a preference, and apply image is a more subtle change than blend if.
Okay. This next one is from Sava Stankovic on YouTube. They're asking, what is the most important thing about blending two objects from separate images into one picture? How do you make colors to match and to make impressions that both the objects are belonging to the same light source?
Okay, so what we're talking about here is basic compositing, and what are the most important parts about compositing? The most important part about compositing, in my opinion, is making sure your lighting matches. So if you are going to be changed, like you have one background picture and you want to put your subject into that background picture, if your lighting is consistent, it should be actually relatively easy to get your subject to look like they're in the actual scene. That's not an easy thing to do, and it takes a lot of practice. One thing I would recommend, if you are actually shooting both objects. Like if you photograph the background and you photograph your subject, during the photo shoot, bring your images into Photoshop and do like a rough composite and check your lighting there. That's what we do every time we need to composite like a subject in the background. We're always testing our lighting and actually like actively changing that. Even when it comes to color temperature, using things like gels, like let's say it needs to be a little bit warmer, I usually prefer to just put the gels on my lighting, making the actual lighting a little bit warmer in color rather than doing that in Photoshop. The second most important thing is making sure your highlights and your shadows kind of like match. You want your tonal range. So if like your subject has highlights and shadows like in this range, but your background has highlights and shadow in that range, it's a hard thing to explain. But if like the lights are lighter in the background or lighter in your subject, you want to make sure that those two match. So you'll either have to compress the tonal range of your background or enhance the tonal range of your subject. And then you have coloring, which is basically can be done with curves, and you want to make sure you apply coloring to your shadows and your highlights differently. And we do have some really wonderful pro tutorials on compositing that go over all this stuff. So we'll probably put a link somewhere around here and you guys can check that sort of thing out. But the most important thing is lighting. Get that lighting correct and that's going to do 95% of the work for you.
This next one is from Den and Segs on YouTube. They're asking, what do you feel are the top 3 key advanced techniques / tools one needs to master to help push their work from amateur to professional?
All right, awesome question. Okay, so the first thing that I'm gonna focus on is using curves, and then I'm gonna tell you why that's so important. Really working with color is so important, and it's also something that's really difficult to teach. Honestly, it's something that you just have to like get in there, start working with your images and playing with colors over and over again. And it's taken me, it's taken me 5 years to get to the point where I am, and I know that I'm still far away from where I need to be. I don't mean that to discourage you, it's a subtle difference. To be able to look at a color, let's say it's a skin tone and say, that needs 2% less magenta and it needs to be 3% more saturated. To be able to look at a color and know that is very, very difficult. And it's something that I've kind of like tried to train my brain to see, but really the only way to get in there is to like isolate a color out using like a layer mask and then adjusting your curves one way or another. So if you are really interested in getting great at Photoshop, getting to know color is going to help you out a ton. So grab a curves adjustment layer, put a layer mask on it so it only affects part of your images, and then play around, like add more blue, add more yellow, magenta, green, cyan, red. Play around with those colors and see what they do to your image. Be able to look at something and think, oh, you know what, that needs 3% more green. That's huge. If you can see that, then like it opens up a world of possibility because nothing's gonna look weird anymore. Things should start to look a lot more refined because the colors all play together and work together really, really well. So the second one I would say is layer masking, and I know this is like, these seem really basic, but they totally are. I mean, when I'm going in and doing a lot of editing on these images, going from like a pretty good image to a spectacular image, I would say 90% of that is using curves, like just going in and using a curves adjustment layer or many curves adjustment layers and layer masks. One of the great things you can do with layer masks is with your brush tools, like making selections with a pen tool and like adjusting that and come back in with your brush tool and feathering out one side versus the other. It's learning what should be light and what should be dark and how those two kind of play with each other. Again, I know it's a relatively subtle difference, but really getting a hold and learning how to use your layer masks well, it's gonna make a huge, huge difference. So the last thing, going from amateur to a professional, is basically in subtlety. I see a lot of amateur work, including my own when I was first starting out. I would like try to push things all crazy and like color everything and do all this crazy stuff. And I was like, whoa, this looks amazing. Look how much red I put in this image.
Extreme.
Yeah. And then I'll look at it like 2 years later and be like, what was I thinking?
Doing?
Yeah, like I made the image worse. So I would say like subtlety is really big, and really good Photoshop, in my opinion, you shouldn't be able to tell that something was even Photoshopped. It should just look totally natural. So I think that, if you are going to be doing something in Photoshop, let's say you're going to be doing some compositing or a special effect or something like that, like go to the level that you think it looks good and then knock it back down like 50% and be like, yeah, this should be a lot more subtle. So just kind of understanding the difference between a subtle effect and an extreme effect. Most of the time, go for the subtle.
So this next one is from Razor2048 on YouTube. They're asking, what is a recommended way to more effectively color an object black? In many cases, when changing colors, it is simple to do everything but black and still end up with realistic results. For example, coloring a red car black. I usually use the hue/saturation and isolate the color and lower the lightness, but reflections are not handled properly at all.
Okay, this is a really good question. It's something that's not super easy to do. The reason is because black absorbs all color, but if you do have a reflection, that has nothing to do with the black. The reflections are going to be exterior to the black. So to do this well, you have to handle the color of the object separately from the reflections or the highlights. So I'm going to just show you guys how I would do it, and we can go from there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to just grab a brush tool and we're going to just paint with black. I'm going to just paint over top of her dress here. And I'm not going to do the whole thing for the sake of time, but I've just got my brush tool and we're quite literally just painting with black. All right. So you could use a pen tool to make this selection if you'd like. You could use, select color range and then fill it with black. There are a lot of different techniques you could use. Right now I'm just using a brush tool because it's a quick method to use right now. But if I was going to be doing this, let's say for like for real, if I was doing this for real, I would consider using a pen tool and cutting this out and then filling it that really nice selection with black. Okay, so we have our dress top at least filled with black. Obviously it looks horrible because there's no highlights, there's nothing left in this image. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this now, I'm going to make this invisible. I'm going to show you guys a way to basically extract the highlights from the dress. Okay, so we're going to use channels for this. You could use channels, color range, quite a few different things. We're going to click on the red, green, and blue, and then kind of like go in between them. Let's duplicate our green channel, take that down to the new channel icon, and I'm going to hit Command L on this, which brings up our levels. And we're just going to pop this a little bit to the right. It's going to give us a little more contrast here in the highlights. There we go. Let's hit OK, and then now we want to make this into a selection. So when this is selected, it's going to select out those highlights, and then we can do whatever we want with the highlights. So Command click here to select out the highlights, and now we're actually going to be able to paint or do whatever we want with those highlights. So in this case, let's just try filling this with white and seeing what it does. I'm going to hit Shift Delete, and then I'm going to say Use White. There we go, and hit Command D to deselect. So basically what it's done is it's taken all of our highlights and filled with white. You can see if I move this, it's just white highlights now. Now, if I make this black layer visible, you can see the highlights actually look pretty good. Like it's white highlights on this black. And if I want to make sure the highlights are visible only where this underlying layer is visible, all you have to do is use a clipping mask, right? So Option Command G, and there you have your clipping mask active. So we've taken the highlights of the dress from underneath it and then applied it right back over top of the dress, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
That worked pretty well, right?
Yeah.
The other thing you want to do, if you do want to change the color of those highlights, you can do that too. Let's just hit Command U, which brings up our hue saturation, and I can colorize the highlights now. So we'll take our darkness down a little bit, and we'll give it some different colors too. So this will like totally change the idea or like the sheen behind it. So it can look like it's got a slight colored cast, like it's a dark garment, but it's got like a slight blue sheen to it too. So there are a lot of options here. This wouldn't be so much black, but there are a lot of options. That's just one of them, and how it looks. So if you want even less sheen to go, like if you want less to show up, that would just be changing your levels adjustment layers to here in your channels. So instead of having that much visible, you would just hit Command L. There we go, and bring this a little bit more to the right. There we go. We'll just select that. Let's make a new layer, Option Command G to clip that, and then fill that with white. There we go. So it's a slightly different effect now, and it looks a little bit more like a stark black. So there's like a gray, and there's a black. Cool, really good question. So just remember, the color of the object itself and the color of the highlights, totally separate, so you have to take care of them separately. And you get something like this.
Fancy.
Yeah, pretty sweet.
So this next one is from MavFan1 on YouTube. He says, "Hi Aaron and Kat, best smile on YouTube, Filipinas."
Nice.
Thank you. He's like, sorry, Aaron. Many Photoshop artists who do composites, even the really good ones, avoid placing full images of people head to toe in their composites because it can be tricky to match the feet to a ground or a background. Also, many aren't trying to look real. For those of us who like to make a composite look as real as possible, it seems it's best to take your model and background photos at the same focal length and from the same height, so those match as much as possible. But once in Photoshop, do you have any tips on getting full figure of someone to look as realistic as possible head to toe on a composite background?
All right, that's a great question. And this is probably one of the hardest things to do in Photoshop, so it makes sense that you're asking this question. Okay, the reasons why, there are a lot of reasons why this is difficult. Perspective has a big deal to do with it. You address that. Focal length has a lot of influence as well. The other influencing factors include like color cast from, let's say, the sky to the ground. If someone's standing on a brown surface, some of that brown is going to bounce. That's just how light works. If I shine a light into a red wall and that light bounces off, it's going to carry some of that red with it, and it's going to have a red color cast. So if light is coming in bouncing off a brown ground where someone's standing on, some of that color is going to then be cast upon the subject as well. So that's something you have to take into consideration. You can use clipping masks and hue saturation adjustment layers or curve adjustment layers to kind of like bring some of that color in. It's also going to affect the highlights and the shadows differently. So let's say if you have like a blue sky in your image, then you're going to get a lot of the reflected light, which is like, the sheen on someone's forehead and things like that. That's going to be blue, but the light underneath, or the like actual color of the skin, is going to be more of a normal skin tone. So you can use a similar method to what we just showed in the dress, where you can select out just the highlights, and then you can color the highlights applicably to what it should actually be reflecting. So you have to think about reflected light versus absorbed light, which is also hard. The other thing is shadows. A lot of people will they don't want people's feet to touch the ground because that is the most difficult part. And the reason is if you haven't captured someone's shadows reasonably well, recreating a shadow from scratch is incredibly hard to do. So what we always try to do in the studio is we try to match our lighting, and if we can, we usually will shoot on like a gray seamless. And if the lighting is matched reasonably well, then we'll just use the existing shadow on the seamless itself, and that's going to be transported over. So there's a lot of great selection techniques you can actually do from taking a shadow from one image to another one. The other thing we do is if you are going to be, let's say, most recently we've got an image coming out in a couple of weeks. It's called a dark forest. It's a really, really cool image, and we wanted people to actually look like they're standing in a desert. So what we did is we brought sand into the studio, and we had people actually stand on the sand instead of instead of having them stand on just a regular seamless. And the reason here is like it takes care of a lot of the hard work for you. Instead of trying to make it look like they're standing in sand in the final image, we just actually used the sand that they would be standing on. A little bit of color correction and layer masking, and it's totally seamless with almost no work. So let's say you were trying to put someone in a museum that had like white marble floors. I would recommend shooting them on a white seamless and then putting maybe some plexiglass or something under them, or bring in some marble into the studio. That's a lot more costly, but if you can get them to stand on something that they're actually going to be wind up standing on, even if it's just color, like if they're going to stand on green grass, like bring some grass into the studio, or at least put some green down, and that's going to help you with your color reflections, things like that. So there are a lot of really great things you can do here, but it's so much give and take. I mean, we're talking about light, which is one of the most complex things, like trillions and trillions of particles bouncing around incredibly fast all the time. So it makes sense that this would be incredibly hard to do, but just stick with it. It's something that requires a lot of work and some give and take, and I would recommend before you're trying to do a composite or something like that, spend some time. Maybe do like the day before, bring in a photo assistant or a friend, buy them a couple beers or whatever, and do some test shoots and have your laptop or whatever open so you can shoot a little bit, do a rough composite, say, all right, 10-minute break, I'm gonna do a rough composite, bring it in, see what you need to change your lighting a little bit, things like that, and then do another one. We do this for every time we're gonna do a composite. It's always like the first hour and a half while we're shooting is always like, all right, let me see if that's gonna work. And we mess with it, and then we shoot a little bit more, mess with it a little again, shoot with a little more, and that's a really good way to get it refined. But yeah, good question. Keep going. It's totally worth doing to get this to be realistic. It's not easy by any means, but if you are able to do this realistically, then it's gonna put you in it's gonna put you close to the top, like a pretty powerful tier of photographers. So yeah, go for it.
Next question. This is from Driz LOL88 on YouTube.
I like your name.
They're asking, how do you know when you're finished?
Okay, Driz, good question. How do you know when you're done? I use the do I hate it test. If I look at an image and I don't hate it, then I'm done. And if I do hate it, I've still got a little more work to do. It helps being a very picky perfectionist. When in Photoshop, in almost every other aspect of life, it's a total pain in my ass, and it gets in the way of living my life like a normal person. But when I'm in Photoshop, being a really picky, perfection-driven person, Photoshop is great. I don't like that. See, that's my perfectionist side coming out. I don't like the answer that I'm telling you about my perfectionist side. If I look at an image and nothing about it bothers me, then I know that it's time to be done. And that's kind of the technique that I've always used from the beginning. When I first started looking at images, my eye was less refined, so less things bothered me. Like I would see some things, but I wouldn't see other things, like big glaring mistakes or things that could be edited. I just wouldn't even see them. As time goes by, you start to see more and more things that bother you, and so you want to fix those. But at the same time, because I take my own photos as well as do the Photoshop, I tend to get better at photography as well. So some of the things that might have bothered me early on, now I just take care of in a photo shoot. So looking at the image, when it gets to the point where I actually like it and nothing else bothers me, that's usually my test to see when it's done.
All right, this next one is from Andy Shrestha on YouTube. They're asking, Aaron, tricks to match perspectives while manipulating images. Saw your circle method in Creative Live. Are there any other techniques to do with non-circle objects? Thank you in advance.
Cool. Andy, thanks for watching the Creative Live, man. It's really cool. And I know that was like it's kind of a weird, tricky concept to cover, and I did my best on Creative Live, but hopefully I can clear it up a little bit now. So basically, when trying to match perspective from one image to another one, it's so hard. It just really is a very difficult thing to do. So I came up with the idea of like a circle method, basically using a circle to determine the angle of view on the circle. And this is like, I kind of like geometry and math, and I'm just a little bit of a dork. I'm a huge dork, actually, when it comes to that. So this is, it's something that works for me, but if it doesn't work for you, don't feel like you need to do it. But basically with the idea of a circle like this. So we're gonna use this camera here, looking at this. So if you're looking at the top of this mug is a perfect circle. But if you're looking at it from straight on, you don't see the circle, you just see it as a flat line, right? So this would be like looking at a circle at 0 degrees, you just see a flat line. As I bring it closer and closer to you, you start to see more and more of the circle itself. And if I brought this all the way over, which I won't do because there's liquid in it, you'd see it as a perfect circle. So that would be like the equivalent of looking from like the top down into a perfect circle. So you can actually use that idea to determine the angle of view. So like if this is 0 degrees and all the way towards you, can I do this?
Sure.
Nasty. All right, if I do this, this is 0 degrees and this would be 90 degrees, then you can actually calculate what what you would see of the circle. So like if this, for instance, is a 45-degree circle, you can divide the width by the height, because the width is going to always be a constant. The width does not change as I do this, but the height is going to change. So at this point, at 90 degrees, the width and the height are both the exact same. So the width of the circle is, you know, whatever, 2.5 inches, and the height of the circle is also 2.5 inches. At this point, the width of the circle is going to be 2.5 inches. The height of it might be something like 1.75 inches. So you can use that formula, basically dividing the width of the height, to then determine the ratio between 90 degrees, which would be this, and 0 degrees, which would be this, and then figure out your angle of view after the fact. So that was the idea that I kind of talked about on Creative Live. Now, it really helps if you're actually photographing something that is a circle already, because then you could just calculate it. But the cool thing is, if you want to use the same idea in any other photograph, you can actually just place a circle on your backdrop. Let's say you're shooting someone on seamless, and you can actually just get a circle, like use a 5-in-1 reflector, or a bottle cap, or not a bottle cap, but you know, a circle like a dinner plate or something like that. You could actually just put that on your seamless, and then you can use that to calculate the angle. And once you have your angle of view correct, you can just take the circle back out and you can put the person in that place. And I really hope this is coming across.
No, I get it.
You get it?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I do.
Okay.
Like, in general, like, I get it.
Okay, cool. So the circle technique is just something that I came up with. There might be better techniques, just something that, you know, I started using to calculate field or angle of view. And then once you have that angle of view locked down, you can take that circle out, it doesn't matter anymore, and then you can shoot totally regular. If you don't want to do that, because that is kind of like the super complex method, you can totally just eyeball it and do some rough compositing while you're on set. So it's usually not too hard to tell if something is like below the camera. Like right now that camera can see the top part of this cup a little bit, so you can see that this is below the camera. Right now it's about on the same level, so you see as much of the top and the bottom, and right now, I don't know if you can even see it, but if it were like this, you'd be able to see some of the bottom of it. So, you know, below the camera, same level, and above the camera. So you could use that method as well. And then as long as your focal length, your height, and your viewing angle, as long as those three are the same, then you should be able to match perspective very easily. But getting to that point is a very difficult thing.
This next one is from Mike Kajori on YouTube. He's asking, I do architectural photography and I use layers to composite interiors and exteriors to balance out the dynamic range. I also do a lot of sky replacement. I use color range and refine edge to improve my selection / masks. Do you have any other suggestions which would improve my results?
Okay, really good question. And replacing a sky is it's a huge topic and something a lot of people have questions about because it's so applicable. You can do it with just about any image where you want a nicer sky. And we're actually going to make an episode really quick, really shortly here in the next couple weeks on replacing a sky. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that as well, and this will help to answer that question. But one of the big techniques I would suggest is using blend if, and we've used it on many Phlearn episodes. Basically, you can double click on your layer itself and then use your adjustment layers, or use your sliders where it says this layer and the underlying layer, and you can use blend if to basically make your layer. I'll just pop into Photoshop real quick. So let's say we had a new layer and this was our sky. I'm just gonna fill it with white right now because why not? What we're gonna do is double click here, and then you can use the information on your underlying layer. And most of the time, the sky is going to be lighter than whatever's under it. So you have a tree line, some mountains, buildings, whatever it is. Those are usually gonna be darker than the sky. So you can hold Alt or Option here and bring your slider in from the left to the right. And basically what this is gonna do is it's going to have your sky disappear from where your landscape is and only appear where the sky in the original image is. Now it's not doing that exactly here because we're in a portrait, but you can see if this were the lighter area, the sky would be visible where her face is and things like that. But we're gonna do an episode soon addressing just this. My other quick tip would be to do, if you have a sky that's really dark and you're trying to put it into an image that's a little bit lighter, just use an adjustment layer and clip it to the sky. Then you can kind of make it brighter, and you don't have to make the whole sky brighter, but usually like the area where the sky meets the land, I would use like a gradient, and on your layer mask you can kind of like pull that from the bottom to the top. So you can fade, making it lighter down towards the horizon, and then it can be darker up towards the top. Usually those help out. So it's kind of a tricky question to just talk about, but we're gonna make an episode answering it very shortly.
All right, so this last one is from JimLap777 on YouTube. He's asking, how should I sharpen my image for a given output like print and web?
All right, so sharpening for output, whether it's gonna be on print or the web. I'm gonna show you guys what I do for the web, because that's probably most of what's gonna be going on, and then print's really, really similar. Basically what you wanna do, let's get your image, let's say this is our final image. You wanna get it to the final size it's actually going to display at. So let's say you're gonna put it on a web page and it's gonna be 800 pixels in width. What I would do is I would create a new layer and then a stamped visible layer. So it's basically just a copy of everything you see. This is from like a Photoshop document or a TIFF or something like that. Then we're gonna right click here and go to duplicate layer. And then I'm gonna duplicate this to a new document. There we go, and we're gonna hit OK. So I've got a new document here. And now what I'm gonna go ahead and do is resize this document to the final size. So I'm gonna go to image and then down here to image size. And then we're gonna say our width, instead of being 5760, is going to be 800 pixels, and we're gonna hit OK. So this is actually the final size of the image. All right, so now that we have the final size, now it's time to sharpen. So whether you're going to be printing or putting this on the web, you wanna make sure it's the final size first, and then you can go through and sharpen. So you can do this in a number of ways. I'm gonna go to filter, we'll go to sharpen, and then we'll just go to unsharp mask, which I almost never use, but I just kinda wanna use it right now. All right, so an unsharp mask, and you can just kind of define, how much you'd like sharpening to go on. That looks pretty good. You bring your radius down to get something a little bit more natural. All right, and hit OK. So we can see there's the before and the after. So now that it's nice and sharp for that size, then it's time to save it out. So if you're saving for web, Shift Option Command S, or you can go to File and then just go to Save for Web. Okay, and then here we're gonna have like an option you can save for JPEG. Usually quality I have between like 60 and 80%, and you can also resize here, but generally I don't. I resize beforehand, and then you're good to go. And then you can hit save. It'll save out that JPEG at a lower quality, which is nice and compressed, and because we created the duplicate, it's not gonna affect the original image at all. So I hope that helped out, and yeah, so every time I'm gonna put something on the internet, that's how we save it out.
Cool. So is there any reason why it has to be the quality has to be like a little lower? Why can't it be like 100 or just for other?
Good question.
Viewers,
Okay, so the higher the quality, that's going to be basically the more actual space the file takes up. So you can see here at the quality of 100, we're taking up 547 kilobytes, which is just, it's going to make load time longer, and really we don't have a lot of reason for putting that large of a file on the internet. If you can't tell a difference in quality from that between this and me changing the quality, like visually I can't tell a difference at all between even like 56%, and now it's only 117 kilobytes. So it's just, in my opinion, it's just a general better practice. Put out the smallest file size you possibly can, and it's gonna be better. It's gonna be better for your servers, it's gonna be better for the viewers, and it's gonna be better for the environment, honestly, because the entire internet takes energy and it cuts down trees, and it's just, no one thinks about it, but when you upload an image onto Facebook, like that costs energy that like it's produced somewhere. So lower file sizes, that actually helps save the planet. I don't know, I'm a big hippie at heart, but it really does. It's a big deal. So, and most people don't even think about it, which is fine because they don't need to, because they got me, people like me, to think about this crap. Anyway, hit save using the lowest possible quality that still looks good, and you're good to go. And then you can save that wherever you want, and you're good to go. Good question. I even got to throw in environmentalism in that answer.
That's the end of our segment. You asked, we answered.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for your wonderful questions. We hope this helped out. If you guys like what we're doing here at Phlearn, subscribe. Just subscribe to the YouTube channel. Why not? It doesn't hurt, and it's a button click away. And you guys can leave us a comment right down below, letting us know how we're doing. This is wrapping up our Fantasy Character Week. We had a lot of wonderful comments about our new series Fantasy Characters, as well as a new pro tutorial we released. We also have a wonderful article on Phlearn.com by Lee Howell, who's an amazing photo manipulator. Such cool images, and we interview him and ask him all kinds of questions like, how did you do it? So if you guys had some of those advanced questions on compositing, things like that, this is a wonderful article to check out. It's going to answer a lot of those questions. for you. And that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching Phlearn. Kat, you did awesome.
You did awesome.
Job. That was a good high five. Bye. Double wave. Can you go double?
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.